Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. As you know, today we've been taking stock of our mental health. And our question of the day to you is, do you live with any mental illness? Do you know somebody who does? Have you disclosed the same to somebody? And if not, why? Talk to us. That hashtag is a new normal. And you're still talking to us. Samuel Ngoge says, it's not easy to disclose this to people. These days, most of the people, mostly who you call friends, are happy when seeing your downfall. It's unfortunate, but a reality. Atunga Hazard says, depression is a norm for many Kenyans who have been hit by the high cost of living and poverty. I included, where sometimes you think to an extent you become blank. Atunga, we hear you. Victor Adero says, I think I'm a victim. Unfortunately, I haven't disclosed because I don't have no one to do so. Victor, we hear you, but you can always reach out to a trusted friend. And we have Ahmed who says, I know somebody, but I haven't disclosed. Or I know a victim, but haven't disclosed. Well, many people feel shy about disclosing their mental state. And it is interesting because stigma is still rife in society, and this is one of the reasons why most people will not talk about their mental state. And even as we understand this better and shift focus on our conversation, this other conversation about spiritual leadership, Reverend Canon Dr. Rosemary Mbogo, who is a Provincial Secretary, Anglican Church of Kenya, and also an author, joins us. And I'll start off with the fact that we are in a pandemic, and apart from you having all these hats that you wear, you're a human being. So, Reverend, how are you doing?
Thank you, Gladys. I am doing well, by the grace of God, because the moment has been stressing, straining, and with a lot of people, tasks to handle, and the diversity of all nature, with the nature of what I do, but also with the community involvement and a broader national, placement that causes me to be broad in touching people's lives, and generally that impacts on you as a person. So I'm well, but you definitely get distressed at moments.
Okay, and even as you hear from our feedback, we have so many people struggling with their mental wellness. From your experience, what have you seen and how are you helping them cope?
Basically, it is very true that people are distressed, and some of them are depressed. I've gone to that level because there's job losses. There is also cut down on salaries, and there is business opportunities that have been lost, and obviously with needs that have not been cut down. And so demands are there, and living standards are being affected. And what we are doing as church and as a person of faith is basically to reach to the communities within our places of worship, as well as visitations into the communities where they live.
Yes. And they say mental health or mental illness is the unseen pandemic. And you are a leader in different spheres. What is the role of leaders in helping their flock, so to speak, in maneuvering through such times?
A leader is a human person, but living among humans, and yet connected with the mind of God and that which is the divine will of God. So they have a bigger assignment and responsibility, not because they are superhuman, but because they depend on a power that is above them. And that makes them be responsible to reach out to all facets of humans that the Lord God Almighty puts a responsibility over them with the grace that God himself gives. And that is the responsibility of every leader, that every leader needs to realize that you have cohorts of groups that you are responsible to reach out into. And so creating time and opportunity to reach out to every one of those cohorts across the intergenerational ministry, because ministry is intergenerational, life is intergenerational. So the key thing is that one must look at society and the communities that we minister to in the place of faith, as well as where these people live, as intergenerational basis, so that we are able to speak to them.
And we are talking about living in a pandemic, and people have different experiences, with most of them being challenges. But then again, there's been a silver lining to this pandemic. And speaking of which, Rosemary has had a silver lining in the form of this book, which is titled What Sustains a Spiritual Leader, a book that you wrote during this pandemic. Talk about that.
Yes, I am really very grateful, Gladys, that when we got to lockdown, and indeed it was lockdown for everyone, I felt charged within me to put down into writing that which concerns leaders across all circumstances of life, and more specifically spiritual leaders. And what I felt charged regarding was that leaders who are spiritually called of God do not necessarily utilize the space in the worship center, because, for instance, even the worship places were closed down. And so the key thing is, how do you minister to the people where they are now? They're in their households, where they live. They're spending time with their families, and some of them are totally on their individual selves. But these people also operate in other spaces of life. They are professionals, they're in the government sphere of service, and they are spiritual beings. They are in the private sector, running businesses, which many of them had been closed down as well. And so we found it's just some threads or strands of the government personnel that were fully operational in beginning to speak the citizenry of Kenya on the direction of how to behave, particularly the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Interior, in coordinating people and helping people to behave and remain where they have been told to remain. And yet, these people have their minds, they have their physical being, and they have their hearts, and all of them require to be ministered to. And so as I thought through that, and I went and walked through it myself, I felt the charge to actually get seriously to put down the calling of a spiritual leader in whatever facet of life where they are put in by God to serve his humanity, and how the individual leader himself or herself ought to conduct themselves, and then the responsibility that is laid on them within the space that they are given, and the opportunities that are in their hands, and the time, because time is of essence for every leader and for every placement that is given to us in life. And so that is what basically I felt charged to do. And in the speaking into this book, it touches the person of the leader, called by the divine power of God, and the need to have that clarity of self. And then after you've had that clarity with self, not only at the calling moment, but consistently through the time that you are carrying out your duties. Because if you don't check yourself with the caller, then you, the called, you lose the pace, and you also lose focus. But when you are consistently aligned with the caller, you, the called, carries the message that the caller desires of you, and that is God. And then how do you then make sure you remain balanced? Because again, as I said earlier, you're ministering to different cohorts of people. Even if you're in the private sector, as a spiritual leader, you have the young, you have the middle, the adults, the senior citizens. They all need to be handled differently, and you have a responsibility, and you need to give time to them and attention. If you're in the government, you need to realize that space has a responsibility, it's an obligation that calls you to align yourself as a spiritual being with the lives of those that you serve, and not ignore or exclude anyone in the services that you render. And more heavily for that, the one who is a spiritual leader within the place of faith, then you have to divine the word clearly, so that when the people listen to you, they have the message to carry them to the operational base where God puts them.
Okay, and you have served as a member recently of the government-appointed Interfaith Council on the national response to the coronavirus pandemic. How have you used these resources you speak of in this sphere of influence?
Thank you, Gladys. That was very, very timely. More specifically, because this was a council that got on her duty when everybody else was sort of frustrated and wondering. Basically, the key question kept being, where are the people of faith? Where are the leaders? Where are our spiritual leaders? Where is the church? That was a constant, voice that we had in the air, because people were wondering who is speaking to us, who is speaking for us, who is concerned about us. And so as we sat together as the Interfaith Council and cutting across all bodies of faith in the nation, we were able to think about that entirety of the populace in the geographical terrain of Kenya. And we were also able to compare base with the others within the group and what is going on in their world. And we're able to dialogue, discuss, and discuss what needs to be done and how does it need to be done, when does it need to be done, and what are the key measures that are required to be carried along. And so we came up with the protocols that were needful for people getting back to places of worship. And we did not just sit and prepare the protocols. We kept on speaking to the nation through press statements that were constant, so that we were aligning ourselves also with the national leadership, His Excellency the President, so that we were part of the process as he spoke to the nation on phased reopening, not only of the places of work that had been locked down, but places of worship, and generally getting back to business. And then we got ourselves into every county. And every individual member was handling 3 counties as an individual. And into the counties, we got into the leaderships of the counties, the governors, and the county commissioners, and the other line of leadership with the Ministry of Health, and shared the protocols with them, and also got to initiate interfaith committees in the counties. And we have worked concurrently with them to the present, consistently checking up on each other and asking, how are you ministering to the people? How are you ensuring that protocols within the places of worship are adhered to? And we are thankful that the places of worship have actually adhered to protocols. And we have not had incidents at all that have been nasty in the places of worship, which means really basically in relationship to what the book speaks into, the spiritual leaders are influencers. You are pace setters, and your word matters as well as your acts. So there has to be an agreement between what you speak and what you do, because people are watching. Sometimes even without you saying your word, whatever you operate in the base of operation means so much to the people who are watching.
Now, as a country, apart from facing the pandemic like the rest of the world, we also have other business going on, especially in the political scene. And this is where the ethics and the priorities of the leaders come to question. From your experience, at a time like this, what should leaders put in place as a priority?
The lives of the people matter most, because God, our almighty creator, of whom as a nation we give allegiance to, that God is our sovereign, leader and authority of this land. The leaders ought to bear the lives of people as a key priority. And this is not done in abstract or in absence of organs and institutions, because it is within organization structures of the nation and the networks that we have in the entirety of leading of the people that matter most. That is where processes are carried through for services to the people. So, and in every one of these institutions and organizations and structures of leadership within the country, we have people who have been given positions. Those individuals have a calling, not just to get themselves lost in the masses and in the crowd and speak like they are not accountable. They must speak like persons who are going to be held accountable by the citizenry, but more importantly by God. And so when leaders mishandle the space that is in their hands, it is really a disservice first and foremost to God, then to themselves as individuals, because they don't live in isolation. They live with the rest of the humanity. But to the common mwananchi. It's so important that the leader, constantly remembers, I have made a commitment, I have an oath, and I am responsible, but I'm going to be held accountable. Sometimes it's frustrating when leaders, and many of them, actually, majority of them, if not all of them, align themselves with faith, with some place of spiritual worship. They are accountable for that commitment to be dignified in their conduct and character. A conduct and character that does not disagree with the behavior and the acts that they undertake in the society. So we hold them accountable as a people, and I take it personally as a responsibility. So though I may not be a political leader, and I am a spiritual leader, I also have some space to speak into that particular cohort of people, because they will come into places of worship, but also I am privileged sometimes within the leadership positions that I carry to endear a voice towards them and to them and be able to speak to them. So I do it sometimes at a personal level and other times at a collective level.
Okay, now let's talk about some of your accomplishments. And you are the immediate former chairperson of the National Council of Churches of Kenya, NCCK, where you made history as being the first woman chairperson of a council since its founding, and the first female canon Anglican province in Kenya. I mean, these are just a few of the first that you've been able to do in your professional life. What is the role of women, even as we talk about spiritual leadership?
Women, like men, are God's creation. And when God created man, male and female, he created them. And he did give them a command and an assignment to take responsibility in having dominion over his creation. That means both the male and the female have a responsibility. The women must take up their space and not allow themselves to be excluded from the space of leadership, as well as from the space of impartation, that influence of generations, because it is never a competition when male and female are given space or look for space to serve humanity. It is complementary assignment. And where women fail and their voices are not heard or they are excluded, it's a total disservice to the humanity of God. Because there is a design in which God has created the woman that is very different from that of a man. And the voice and the citing, the detailing of a woman, if absent in any cohort of leadership or space of a community, that space, that community lacks heavily. And I think for me, the way I address leadership for women and men is that men need not be threatened at all by women taking their positions, and the women should not apologize for the gifts God has given them, because it's divine. It's not something you borrow out of the way. It is inbuilt in us, and God cannot give gifts and then expects us to just not utilize them. So the woman has her place.
Okay. Yeah. And even as we bring this conversation to an end, I mean, they say to whom much is given, much is expected. So what is the importance of targeting and attaining excellence in all spheres of life when it comes to a leader?
Balance is of essence. Because if a leader does not take time to rethink and refocus, they will easily lose track. And the track loss could be either in the loss of their wholesome health, because they have not taken time to eat well, taken time to rest, taken time to reflect, and consistently ask, what is my purpose in life? For what reason do I have the space that is in my hands? Who am I accountable to? And to whom am I answerable for the things that I do? So the leader needs to balance themselves and consistently think about also being destiny helpers. You are not an aid to yourself. You must mentor others. You must enable others. Appreciate networking. Appreciate team play, because we work together and the excellency is attained as teams. A leader must consistently remember that indeed they need to leave behind them a legacy that will withstand the test of time. That after the end of my space and life, what do I leave behind? And building into posterity is critical. Not sometimes, but all the times. And then balance between hardships and trials with riches and provisions that come as trappings of power, of praisement, of possession. Lest somebody quickly thinks, I have gotten it all, so now I can eat and drink and have my merry. We must balance, bear the pain with others, and also when it faces us, we realize it's part of life. That balance is of essence.
Very well said. Reverend Canon Dr. Rosemary Mbogo, who is a provincial secretary at the Anglican Church of Kenya. She's also an author and she wears very many hats. And she has recently written this book, What Sustains a Spiritual Leader, which will be launched on in January?
January 13th.
Yes.
At All Saints Cathedral. And you are welcome, 4:30. Yes. We are inviting all leaders from the government, positioning within the academia, within private sector, within the church, or places of leadership. This is your space. Come, we share together and be able to serve the humanity of God better.
Thank you and congratulations, Reverend, on this third book. And as you heard, there is a lot that goes into it and a lot has been brought out. Remember, to whom much is given, much is expected. So this is definitely a must-have book for any leader. Well, thank you for joining us on Your World this morning. Tomorrow we'll be back on Your World, looking at different facets of life. One of them will be on food safety and its relation to the environment. See you then.